Welcome back to Burning River Bushcraft. Today we're going to go fishing with slingshot bands. So today I'm going to be showing you a different way to get food from the wild with a set of slingshot bands. We're going to be using this as a spring engine to make a fish trap. So here's a little word of warning before we even do this. It's hot out right now and the UV rays are going to absolutely murder the slingshot band. So if I have it stretched over a continual period of time in this kind of heat, this is a very, very short-term trap. So in a long-term situation, I wouldn't want to do this. It's good in an emergency, but if I had my druthers, I would go cut a green stick out of the wood line, come over here and do the exact same setup I'm going to show you with a green stick. So we're going to start this process with just putting a bowl in. I just want a loop on one end. There we go. Now on this, I'm going to go ahead and attach probably 2 armfuls of fishing line. Now it's going to be hard to see this monofilament, but I'm just going to attach the monofilament to the bank line. And I'm going to be using my standard fisherman's knot. Okay, now I'm going to rig the other end of this monofilament up with hook, sinker, improvised bobber, and some type of bait. Alright, so I've got a tripod with a straight stick coming out, similar to some of my other fishing videos. I did yo-yos and speed hooks. This is all a similar concept. The difference is just going to be in the spring engine, and that's going to be my slingshot bands. For a trigger, this is a sharpened stake on one end. This is an L7 trigger, so this is going to get driven down into the mud. This end is going to be attached to the slingshot band. They're going to hook together. The fish is going to pull, and it's going to release the band, and it's going to set the hook for me. And then there should be a fish on the line when I'm done. Alright, so like most primitive traps, nothing quite works like it's supposed to. They're real finicky. Yeah, that's why it's worth it to carry speed hooks or yo-yos or something. This tripod itself is too short to get a full stretch on the bands like I was originally planning. So I'm just going to double it over. So I just double it over and then measure my stretch, and I should be able to get, you know, about here on the line. So I just kind of marked it, and I'm just going to tie it off real quick. Now I'm placing this dead under line so it's not side pulling at all. Alright, so I've got the stake in the ground directly underneath the tripod. I've got the bands tied to the top of the L7 trigger. Let's test it out here. Okay, it is holding. Now the monofilament's actually going to be tied to the tripod itself. I'm just going to have a lead in coming out, and then let's see how this is going to work. The fish is going to pull the string. That's going to set the hook. Okay, so this end's all baited up. I'm going to cast it out just to get a rough distance on how far I need to tie it off to. Now my one concern, it's a little bit windy today and the wind's blowing back at me. So, you know, my initial thought was to set this at the opposite side of the pond today so the wind's blowing it away from me. I was advised by my my chief fisherman son that this is a better spot, so I'm going to go with his opinion. So I'm going to get the end of this so I don't lose it, and then I'll toss it out into the water and we'll tie it up. So we're all set here using this passive fishing technique utilizing an L7 trigger powered by a slingshot band. There's nothing really experimental about this. I mean, an L7 trigger is a classic trigger. It's easy to carve. I've used them quite a bit. It is a directional trigger. I did not point that out. You have to have the L7 notch pointed into the direction that the fish or the game is going to be pulling it. If I set this up backwards, you know, I could have a whale on here and it's not going to pull it. I have it pointed in the proper direction. I'll give you a close-up of that here at the end of the video. I guess the only real question is the wind going to be pushing my bait back on shore? And if that's the case, I can wait for a calmer day or move to the other side of the pond. And how bad is the UV rays going to kill this slingshot band? If this was a set of flat bands, I would guess it would cook it within a day. Tubes like this, I'm hoping I can get a week out of it, but I hope I don't need that. Hopefully I have a fish here in a few hours. So here's an up-close shot of the trigger. If you notice, this is pointing out towards the pond, so that's going to be the direction of pull. It's going to set it off. I actually tied the bands onto the tripod with a piece of bank line, and then I doubled my line to get out a little bit further. There's my float. So I'm out a good 12 feet right now. So this is actually day 2 of the L7 slingshot band triggered fish trap. The first day I actually did have a fish on. It was unable to pull the L7 trigger. So I did a couple different things. I cleaned up the cuts. The fish is playing me right now. I cleaned up the cuts on the L7 so it was a little bit smoother. And what I actually had, because this is a double band, I was using both ends of the band, it was too much tension pulling up. So I didn't require that much tension to set the hook. You know, I wasn't trying to spring a possum in the air or anything crazy like that. So because I had so much pressure on it, that took quite a bit more pressure to release the L7. So to counteract that, I could have done a couple things. I could have single banded the slingshot bands. Didn't do that. I just lowered the entire tripod assembly down. So spread the legs out apart. That gave me less stretch on the slingshot bands themselves, so that was less pressure, so that was easier for the L7 to be triggered. My float's out here. It just disappeared a minute ago. Like I said, I did have that fish on. I was unable to land him because I did not have that set because of the fish could not pull through the L7. Alright, so small largemouth bass was able to pull through that L7, and this hook itself was set by the aid of the slingshot band. Alright, so yet another way that slingshot bands can feed in the wilderness. This was an L7 trigger set. Took 2 days before I finally got the trigger tuned up, but today I would say this has been in the water less than 5 hours. You know, less than ideal to be utilizing your slingshot bands like this. You're exposing them to UV rays, and it's definitely shortening the life of them. But in an emergency situation, they will put food on the table. This has been Jamie Boggs with Burning River Bushcraft. See you next time. So then for a quick reset, I've got all my monofilament wrapped around my float, my slingshot bands hooked from the bank line down to my L7 trigger, and here is my stake. So anytime I find an overhead branch, if I can't find that, I can manufacture a tripod, and I'm back to fishing again.